I'm going to keep it kind of quick today because nobody wants to have their Monday bogged down with depressing stuff. It's Monday, it's depressing enough already. And let's face facts. There was some depressing stuff over the weekend, like National's big financial announcement, which was the epitome of right-wing compromise where you do the things my way or else. And in this case, it was a promise to do more of what they've been doing. Well, let me just check those business liquidation numbers or unemployment numbers or beneficiary numbers or homeless numbers or the number of people who are leaving the country for greener pastures elsewhere or the inflation data. Let's see how that's all going. Oh. Although I did like that Willis admitted that she understands that other parties aren't ready yet to release their financial plans before the election, because we can then point to that ridiculous, over-the-top press conference that she called in mid-June demanding Labour release its financial plan because she assumed some numbers and wanted an explanation on a Sunday afternoon, and note just how desperate that whole thing looked. It was actually coupled with some other well-received Labour small business policy news, which was designed to ensure that small businesses have easier access to government contracts and cut down on their paperwork by streamlining government infrastructure for small businesses around what they'd call a centralised business number, meaning that there's no need to continue repeating the same information being sent to multiple agencies when you apply for stuff. It's kind of like when you're applying for a job and you upload a CV and then you get asked to also upload a whole bunch of fields that are all covered in your CV. That would be removed. I think job sites should take that on board. But that didn't make huge dents in the news this weekend. There was also the Greens' announced plan to build critical response infrastructure around Marae, which have proven really bloody useful during the 24 states of emergency that we've had this year, along with the fact that they were leading response bases for major disasters like when Cyclone Gabriel hit. And because the investment is designed to both deal with immediate funding for urgent needs and a long-term investment in Marae, which would allow them to better plan for future adaptation like climate adaptation or social services or health needs, the approach here is what you'd call kaitiakitanga of Marae, which the party says is what Tino Rangatiratanga is all about. But the fact is, Sunday was actually just another day for the right to shovel bullshit and people seemed to be sick of it. It started with Simeon on Q&A where he was fact-checked on his claim of having hired 2,100 full-time equivalent nurses. Turns out under their funding and directive, it was only 53 and the rest were actually from Labour's funding and hiring directives in that transition period. So yeah, 53 nurses in just under 3 years. And this seems to have spooked the party a bit because they've actually started rolling out this absolute bullshit claim that we have to pay $9 billion a year to deal with interest on core Crown debt that Labour racked up. The number is right, but that's all core Crown debt, which has been climbing since John Key was in charge and includes the time that Willis has been in charge as well. But don't worry, Nicola wants to fire another 9,000 civil servants and slash even more government funding and maybe look at raising GST to make it all better. Which economists have already pointed out it will not do that, it will just make things far, far worse. And to end it all, ACT Simon Court is continuing with ACT's long-held tradition of saying anything artistic that ties into Māori or Pacifica culture is clearly a waste of money, by claiming a new statue unveiled as part of the new Auckland CRL was essentially misappropriating rates, money put aside for infrastructure. The $1.38 million cost of 2 statues was mostly covered by a specific targeted rate for Auckland's central city that was set up specifically to transform public spaces and support placemaking and public art. The rest of it was actually paid for out of Council's Public Arts Fund, which is taken from general rates as laid out in the budget well in advance. So there was no money removed from any infrastructure project to pay for this. So it was a busy Sunday, with what feels like more negativity and bullshit from the coalition. So I've added those 3 claims, the artwork cost, the new FTE nurses, and the debt pay down onto the fact check page at election2026.co.nz. Feel free to download them and share them anytime your local coalition MPs or wealthy, sorted, entitled Prime Minister tries to bullshit you and other voters. Hello there, Kia ora podcast listeners. I don't know what to say on this one. I had a fairly busy Sunday morning. I did coffee in context and then I sort of went out and about and did my day stuff. And yeah, I got constant notifications throughout the day of, oh my God, which is really frustrating in a way. And like, I totally get it. It's an election period. There's going to be lots of election announcements. But to start the day off, like literally, I started Coffee in Context and hadn't watched Q&A, but I knew Simeon was on there. And I'm getting messages while I'm streaming going, This lying little piece of slimy fucking shit from people who were pulling him up on things like the number of FTE nurses that had been hired and how that was fact-checked on air. And I love that it was fact-checked. I think that is amazing, and I wish that happened more often. I just wish Simeon had been there for the fact check. And this is where things get really tough. If they withhold information, you can't really fact check in real time. So it does become a lot harder to push back on these things. But I'm really glad that the Q&A team and Jack team were like, no, this is the truth. This is what's happened. But that wasn't the only weird lie that we saw throughout the day. There was the whole financial announcement that, National's doing a financial announcement. Ooh, and I'm like, well, they're not going to be releasing their financial plan. They don't tend to do that until a couple of weeks before the election. It may be complaining that they need to get hold of Labour's financial plan or whatever. And to be fair, they did turn around this time and go, well, actually, we could see why some parties wouldn't have that. Why the hell did Nicola have that stupid press conference in the middle of June then when she's like, I demand to know what Labour's thing? It just looks dumb and idiotic and desperate. But they did their big announcement, which was basically, we're going to slash more costs because we've got these 3 things that we think fiscal government should absolutely agree to, and the others need to agree with us or else. And I thought that's a really dumb way of putting together a policy. It's basically do what we say or else. And you do what we say means breaking your own policies. Like it's less of a policy and more of an ultimatum, and it just comes across as really desperate, which makes sense if you see the polls that aren't the courier polls that are coming out, because they don't show great things for National. And then there was the weird claim that I think came from that of, we're paying back $9 billion a year on the debt that Labour incurred. It's like, yeah, you're paying back $9 billion a year on interest, which works out to be about, I think it's $181 billion that we have as our annual GDP. So you're working out about 5% of our annual cost goes to servicing debt. The average household's about 40%. So it's certainly a lot lower than that, which is not a bad thing. It's a horrible analogy, but they like to use the whole household budget analogy, so fuck them. They can have the same treatment. At the same time, that's not the only debt that we're servicing. John Key built up debt. Helen Clark built up a little bit of debt and had paid down most of it by the time John Key came in. He brought in, I think he went up about $60 billion in debt. Nicola Willis has already racked up about $40 billion in operational debt. And the debt that we got during COVID, as much as they like to vilify it, National Act and... Well, actually, National and Act, and I think New Zealand First technically at the very beginning, they voted for it. In fact, National and Act wanted us to borrow more, so there would be higher debt levels because we could certainly do that. It's within our debt ceiling. So now they're like, oh, debt bad. It's just so dumb, and people fall for it, which is really idiotic. And when you look at their profiles, you just sit there going, how do you walk and talk at the same time? How do you chew gum and breathe? There's some people that you just have to ask why they're not seeing this, which is really weird. And then there was the really weird one from Simon Court, which shows up in today's video. And this was just a little bugbear of mine. I've done a little bit last year work with the Central City organisation that was paid for by the targeted rate around a couple of concerts that we put into the Central City of Auckland. And that was really cool. We had live concerts, live music in Aotea Square. We did a big event down in Takutai Square at Britomart. I think they were all paid for by that fund. And like the targeted rate is specifically for an area within the CBD to beautify the area, to bring it to life, to find ways to get people engaged, to find ways to get people out and about, to bring in more green space, to basically make it a much more welcoming space to bring people in. And I think it's a brilliant idea. It's one of the things that Hamilton used to have and then they got rid of. And now Hamilton had free parking that was actually paid for by their targeted rate. Now the free parking is taken out of the general rate. And for some reason, the people down there aren't complaining so much. But to be fair, the people down there are also dealing with the fact that their council came in without any kind of coordination or submission process or consultation and just changed their voting system for the next election back to first past the post. Because that's what happens when you elect a bunch of old right-wing, half a bunch of conspiracy theorists who sit there and get all of their information from Voices for Freedom and don't actually listen to the consultation documents or care about actually consulting with people. See what I mean about Sunday being really depressing? Like, it just... yeah. So my camera is freezing on me, so I hope the audio is coming through. I guess that's a sign I should stop now. Stop now. Go and do other things, because it's almost 10 o'clock at night here. If you haven't had a chance yet, check out Coffee and Context. It's the podcast version is streaming now, and the video version's been up on the YouTube page for a day and Facebook page for a day. Go check it out. We learned a little bit about episodic framing, Entman's framing masks. There's a few options there to teach you a little bit more about media bias and how we can see the bias in our media, and how that doesn't mean that they're not holding government to account. But yeah, go and learn stuff. It's free. Get a free education. That's a dream. Free education. All right, until next time, ka kite anō, live long, prosper, be one with the force. Go out there and make sure that you're telling politicians to tell the truth. At least try to get them to do that.